Black water, no horizon, and an anxious convoy pushing west as a single ping hangs in the headphones aboard HMS Starling. A long, slow contact steadies ahead, bearing constant. The Wolfpack is out there, closing, and the bridge waits for the word to fire. By the end, you'll see how a forward-firing, contact-only weapon erased the Wolfpack's edge and flipped the Battle of the Atlantic in a single season. If you want more stories where engineering, nerve, and timing decide the fight, subscribe and come with us into the black water. Hold your breath. This one hits before the ocean knows it's been struck. 4 years into the war, convoy escorts had chased phantoms. ASDIC, the early sonar, could point to a submarine, but not solve the geometry of a moving target once the attack run began. Traditional depth charges fell from the stern and blossomed at guessed depths. The moment they rolled off the racks, the escort's own noise and the shock of explosions blinded sonar and handed the U-boat a gap to slip away. German skippers learned to time that gap. They snapped into hard turns, blew ballast, or dove steeply. The charge patterns thundered behind them, and the water closed over their wake. By late 1942, the imbalance looked grim. A convoy might throw hundreds of charges for a single sinking, while U-boat packs put torpedoes into freighters with method and patience. Inside the Royal Navy's peculiar little shop of ideas, the Directorate of Miscellaneous Weapons Development, a physicist named Charles Goodeve framed the problem differently. The attack needed to go forward, not aft. The tracking sensor needed to see through the shot, and the weapon had to tell the crew instantly whether the geometry was right. Hedgehog answered those 3 demands. A spigot mortar in the bow area threw 24 bombs out in a tight pattern, landing roughly 200 to 250 yards ahead of the ship. Each bomb carried a contact fuse. No pressure trigger, no time fuse, no exploding miss. If a projectile struck steel, it detonated. If the pattern was off, the ocean stayed quiet. Silence on a miss did more than spare the ears. It kept the sonar picture intact, so the plotting table could decide immediately. Correct and fire again, or shift bearing and build a second approach. Frederick John "Johnny" Walker took command of the Royal Navy's 2nd Support Group in April 1943 and made that logic a doctrine. His ships were Black Swan-class sloops, Starling, Wild Goose, Woodpecker, Kite, Wren, Magpie, tight handling, long-legged, and built for the grind. Support groups were hunters, not fixed escorts. They roamed to reinforce threatened convoys and then prosecute contacts to a finish, staying on scene long after the immediate attack had passed. Walker drilled a deliberate approach he called keeping the contact alive. The escort did not charge. It crept into a firing lane at the speed the sonar operator needed, aligning the ship's track to cross ahead of the submarine's motion. The bridge team set bearings and ranged out the moment the sound figure steadied. Fire control knew the time the pattern needed to fly and fall. The helmsman turned to bring the ellipse of bombs over the point solution. On the gunnery deck, ratings swiveled the Hedgehog frames to account for own ship roll. The sea state and wind matter more than pride, Walker told them. The pattern had to land where the math said the U-boat would be. Because the salvo landed forward, the escort never had to lose contact. The ASDIC set kept pinging while the projectiles arced, while they splashed, and while they sank. The first instant told the truth. A rapid, hard crack meant steel. A flat sea that returned only the ping meant miss and correction. Contrast that to depth charges. With charges, sound and shock masked the ocean for precious tens of seconds, and by the time the surface boiled, the submarine had taken a new course. Hedgehog also shrank the window for U-boat countermeasures. The classic knuckle turn that threw turbulence into the water did little against a forward-thrown pattern already falling into the submarine's projected path. Chemical decoys could muddy the sonar return, but not after contact-only bombs had already left the racks. They bought time only before the approach, not during the final seconds. Walker's group trained until range calls and helm adjustments sounded like one voice. A fraction too fast, and the pattern would drop aft. A fraction too slow, and it would land short. For the escort commander, the hardest choice was tempo. Too many quick shots risked burning attempts on a bad solution. Too much contemplation gave the U-boat room to change the equation. He split the difference with discipline. One ship crept on, fired once, and if the sea stayed silent, peeled away to hold contact while a sister ship took the next shot from a slightly different angle. That relay turned the single salvo into a chain. With 2 or 3 sloops rotating, the U-boat lived inside the escort's decision loop, reacting to a new approach before its last move had even taken effect. In early May 1943, a westbound convoy designated ONS-5 drew a crowd of German boats. Weather and ice drove them south into the lanes, and the air gap west of land-based patrol aircraft gave them room to mass. The first firm contact in the small hours set the tone. Starling found a slow, steady echo ahead and slid down to the speed that kept the bearing from wandering. Walker stood with the headset crooked against one ear, watching the plotters fold grease pencil arcs across the chart. They whispered range. The helmsman nudged a degree starboard. The ship held its breath. The order to fire cut the night air. 24 bombs stepped into the dark, fell in, and vanished. For a second, there was only water and ping. Then a single blow came up from below like a slammed door. Men on deck felt the plank under their boots jump, and the sonar trace shredded into 100 shards. Oil surfaced in a thin sheen, carrying pieces of paint and cork. The plot settled. The convoy kept moving. A second contact appeared off the starboard bow, this one with a subtle weave. The operator called it slipping, a boat changing depth in choppy layers. Instead of mirroring the weave, Walker let the sonar do the averaging. The ship held a straight line to keep the bearing rate readable, and the guns threw the next ellipse slightly ahead of the predicted path. No explosion answered underwater. The pattern had fallen clean, and the sea gave back only the ship's own ping. The helmsman eased to port, and the second ship in line, Wild Goose, edged into position. Her bombs walked into the expected intercept, and again there was silence. That silence did not shake the team. It armed them with data. Sonar called the bearing creeping left. Woodpecker slipped in on the opposite beam, turned 5 degrees to bracket the drift, and fired. This time the sound came late, closer to the end of the sink. It was smaller, more a crisp pop than a clubbing crack, but it was contact just the same. The trace for that target faded like smoke. Men waited for the ugly rising bubble that meant an air pocket, but the sea decided to keep its secrets. Another minute, another contact. This one made a small, galloping pattern on the screen. The signature of a boat using the propeller to kick right-left to disturb the return. The bridge had seen that trick. Starling held off the temptation to chase the gallop, and instead kept the motor beats centered in the headphones, letting the engineer tune out the flutter. Hedgehog fired again. Splashes marched forward in a rough crescent, and the crew strained, attuned now to the difference between meaningless noise and the only sound that counted. The hit, when it came, was immediate and clean. Steel on steel, then a startle snap that rattled crockery in the wardroom. Downrange, nothing surfaced but black. The absence said enough. A U-boat that failed to die exploded. One that died properly left little to see. The Wolfpack did not take the hint. A periscope feather broke water briefly in the convoy wake, a distant V like a finger drawn through ink. Kite turned in to block, not charging, but cutting the path like a shepherd's dog. Her sonar locked, slow and clear, and she began the deliberate nose-forward crawl the group had practiced. A sharp conning tower flash flicked up in the gloom as the U-boat tried the opposite gambit, surfacing, intent on running in the rough rather than drowning below. It was a high-risk bid to outpace the escorts. Magpie's gunners were already awake. The moment the gray cylinder broke water, tracer licked out, and the silhouette vanished again in spray and darkness. Rather than chasing the brief surface mark, the escort team returned to first principles. The boat had to go down, or it had to go somewhere, and both paths drew a line for the plot. Wild Goose picked up the echo as it deepened, calling the range with a flat voice. She edged in until the forward mortars could cover the solution without running it over. The salvo fell true. A flat beat shook the sea-keeping plant, and men exhaled. The convoy continued, oblivious in the dark, freighters pounding along at 9 knots. Not every approach ended with a hit. One boat used a decoy to split the return, a bright smear designed to look like a hull. The operator noted the difference. The decoy lacked the propeller note and the tiny rhythmic Doppler waver of a living target. Starling ignored the decoy, judged the real contact to be slightly shallower, and fired ahead of the brighter false mark. The bombs went in hot. The seconds ticked. Nothing answered. Walker signaled a reset. Wren rolled the decoy with a quick pattern of charges to clear the water, and the real contact firmed again out of the noise. Woodpecker was next in, slow enough that her bow wave scarcely whispered. Crewmen counted splashes in their heads, because experience had taught them how many seconds to expect before truth or silence. A dull bang arrived late, suggestive of a glancing strike. It might mean a tail hit or a grazing detonation on the fin. Either way, the picture on the set wobbled and then steadied lower. 2 ships together pressed the advantage, one holding the bearing, the other searching for the depth at which the boat now ran wounded. The pressure of time sat with both crews. A damaged U-boat could still kill if the escorts got sloppy. The wounded target tried to double back under its own wake, hoping the wash would hide it. That trick worked often with depth charges, but a forward-firing pattern did not care about old bubbles. Hedgehog splashes marched into the white water. A crisp detonation answered. Men let go another breath they did not remember holding. As dawn shaded the horizon, long rollers lit under a leaden sky. The aircraft patrols would soon extend their reach from land, but on this night into morning it was the sloop's work. The radio spoke in clipped phrases between ships. Approaches were spelled out in bearings and ranges, not bravado, and corrections passed quickly to whoever best held the angle for the next throw. A U-boat captain somewhere out there decided to stay deep and ride it out. He committed to quiet, hoping the escorts would lose auditory purchase. Aztec did not wholly rely on noise. Reflections from a solid shape were enough, and the escort crew learned that a steady, quiet target was the easiest target to aim at. The short, violent depth charge runs of old tried to solve the problem with power. The new style solved it with patience, speed control, and information that could flow even while the weapons flew. Ship by ship, shot by shot, the pattern repeated. Silence meant adjustment, not despair. A single explosion meant a scored hit and a shift to search for any companions. Sometimes the escorts saw survivors. Often they saw only oil and an absence. As the weather worsened, even rolling decks did not stop the rhythm. Gunners compensated for the swell by adjusting the elevation across the frames so that the dispersion remained tight where it mattered. This was the moment Walker had built for. A night when escorts did not simply react to torpedoes, but imposed a plan on the sea. The group used time in layers. One layer held contact, one layer attacked, and one layer stood ready to absorb any breakout to the surface. An evading boat that tried to surface between ships found itself in a corridor of eyes and guns. A boat that tried to sprint ahead found a slow-moving wall. The convoy's merchant masters, each with his own life in his hands, kept station and watched their escorts perform that odd, methodical dance. Now and then a captain on board a freighter would see nothing at all beyond a faint flash over the horizon and wonder why the attack never came. The answer lay in feedback. By building a weapon that either hit or said nothing, the Royal Navy gave its crews meter-by-meter control over a problem too messy for guesswork. That design thinking extended to training. Walker's men practiced until they could judge, by the interval between splash and bang, roughly what part of the submarine the pattern had found. Some salvos yielded twin detonations, seconds apart, as two bombs in a single cluster made contact. Others gave a muted thump that felt more like a hull plating stave-in than a catastrophic break. Those small distinctions mattered little in the dark. What mattered was the binary signal between correction and success. In that signal, morale lived. Across the wider ocean, other escorts learned similar lessons. The bulk of the ONS-5 fight spread over days, with several Wolfpacks shadowing and striking when weather let them. Aircraft from long-range squadrons, now reaching farther with improved fuel capacity, also joined the hunt by day. Their pressure forced more boats down, where Walker's methods held strongest. That combined, unrelenting attention kept the wolves on the back foot. Blow after blow wore away their confidence. The morning passed into a gray, bruised afternoon. The convoy plowed on. Support Group 2 did not let go of the hunt until the contacts ceased to bear. When the last echo slid off the screen, the bridge breathed and plotted fuel. Silence at sea can mean safety, or it can mean absence. On this day's work, silence meant the job was done and the convoy would see land. Immediate signals went out. The group reported attacks prosecuted and contacts lost, then turned to the quiet, careful business of checking for survivors and debris in the lanes of destruction. A few men were pulled from rafts or the water when weather allowed. Records vary on the exact numbers recovered after particular actions, and the escort schedule left little time to linger. News of the methods mattered as much as individual tallies. Across May 1943, Black May, U-boat losses soared, Allied shipping losses fell, and the strategic balance in the Atlantic tilted for good. The weapon's contact fuse and the doctrine built around it delivered a higher kill rate per attack than old charge barrages, and it did so without blinding the one sensor escorts absolutely needed. From then on, escort training baked in the deliberate sonar-held approach and the relay of ahead-throwing attacks. Walker's second support group continued into 1944 with strings of kills that demonstrated the system's maturity, and other navies adopted similar forward-firing gear and tactics. Don't fight the last fight harder. Change the geometry and the feedback loop. When a weapon tells you immediately whether you're right, the next decision comes faster, and the ocean gets smaller for the enemy. For more uncompromising combat engineering and the people who made it work, subscribe and join us on the next run.